All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar, Advancing Education, the Future of Skills and Development. So before we go ahead and get started, please feel free to use the chat and tell us who you are, where you're from, what your role is in education, and feel free to share your X handle so we can communicate and kind of link up with you. And then we'll just get started and dive right into it. Feel free to use the chat area if you have any questions during the webinar. We'll read and react to those comments and questions that you post throughout the webinar itself. And you can also post questions using the Q&A feature that you see at the bottom of your Zoom webinar window. We'll collect those questions and address those at the end. If you can't see the slides or you're having any kind of technical issues, close the webinar and rejoin with that same link that was sent to your email. And if you're using a dual monitor setup, just go ahead and check behind some of the open windows for a second Zoom screen. Just as a reminder, an on-demand version of this webinar will be available at the same link that you registered or that was sent to your email about 30 minutes after the end of the webinar itself. You can also visit forward-edge/webinars to look for the on-demand recording and to look and see some of the sneak peeks of our webinars going forward this year. Feel free to share what you're learning or what you love most on X, and remember to use the hashtag FEK12. So let's go ahead and get started. So my name is Tori Millette, and I'm an instructional design coach at Forward Edge. And Michael Rausch, the amazing Michael Rausch, will be graciously presenting for us today. So thank you so much to him. Keep your eyes on the chat for any links or any resources that might be shared, and just enjoy our time together today. So now just a little bit more about who we are at Forward Edge. We are a K-12 technology company. And when I say that, I mean we do all of the things educational technology for schools, including selling hardware, setting up and managing wireless networks, to even running the cables that are required to use the monitors and things that are in the schools. Now, a little over 3 years ago, we began to really focus heavily on the curriculum and integration side of things. So asking the question, once you have the technology in the hands of teachers and students, how do we use that effectively? Everything that we do here at Forward Edge is linked back to the ISTE standards. So leader, citizen, and designer are the ones that we're going to be focusing on today. And now thinking about the C&I department, we all come with an educational background and we have a variety of classroom experiences. So the bottom line, we offer vision and planning services, we provide professional development, and we serve as an on-site integration coaches for schools. So there's a lot of things going on here at Forward Edge, lots of resources and a collective amount of information and just knowledge about using technology effectively. So all that being said, and without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michael to get us started.
Thank you so much, Tori. It's been a big day today. We just, the school where I'm working at, this is our first day with students. So it's been kind of a hustle and bustle and getting kind of, getting our legs back under us and getting started with the new school year here. So hopefully you're either just started or getting ready to start where you are. And so it's really appropriate, I think, to the topic that we got set up for the beginning of this school year. So we hope that you can join us not only for this webinar, but we have them coming up each month and during this school year. So you'll hear a little bit more about what the rest of this series is going to look like. But for today, we want to talk a little bit about the idea of keeping in mind how we can leverage our lessons for the future. Not just, the test on Friday, but, that distant future, that little more distant future. We want to talk a little bit about nurturing critical thinking agility in our students. We want to talk a little bit more about being able to really expand some of those skills that are going to benefit our students, supporting themselves and advocating for themselves down the road. Also, finally, we want to make sure that during all this, we keep in mind the ideas of netiquette and digital literacy and how we can bring those bring those to the table, how we can include those in what we're already doing, and how that's going to benefit our students as well. So we're going to take a quick look at all three of these pieces. Now, any of those three pieces could be a webinar in and of itself. So we're going to take a hack at looking at a little bit of each of those and how we can fit them together. So let's get started talking a little bit about leveraging our lessons for the future. There are a lot of ideas out there, maybe even a lot of different opinions about education and the speed of change, right? How fast things do or don't change in the world of education. And I'm going to go back and take a look at just a quick idea of go back into some history on this. What would you expect this resource to tell you about space travel? So take a look at that, make some, get some ideas about what you think that resource there might tell you about space travel. Now, I can tell you from my own personal experience when I was in grade school. Now, as our colleague Tracy would certainly remind everyone if she were here, this was a world before Chicken McNuggets. And so when I was in school, I was in a classroom that had a set of these in the classroom. Now, this was still in the 70s, so we had actually been to the moon. But when I would go to that encyclopedia and get an article about space travel or about the moon or anything like that, this encyclopedia set didn't know anything about that because it was made before that happened. And I was sitting there in 1978 looking at an encyclopedia article that speculated about whether or not we would ever be able to put someone on the moon. And so there was a disconnect there. There was a disconnect between the resources that I had available and what the case was in the world that I lived in. We've been dealing with this kind of an issue. We've been dealing with this kind of a circumstance for a long time, and we've dealt with it in a lot of different ways. So we're going to take a look a little bit about how to deal with some of that disconnect. One way we deal with it is talking about, we want to make sure that we give students real world application. That's a great goal. All right. That is a fantastic goal. We want to make sure that now more than ever, we want to make sure that there's a real reason for why students are learning what we're having them learn. Students more than ever want to know why we're having them learn what they're learning. What's this for? What's this going to do? What's this really going to change about the world that I live in? So we're talking about a real world application. Here's a second grade Common Core math standard. And so even if you're in a place that doesn't use Common Core, you probably have something really close to this, something very much like this. And this content standard just says, be able to solve word problems involving dollar bills, quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies using dollar and cent symbols appropriately. And an example of that would be, okay, if you have 2 dimes and 3 pennies, how many cents do you have? This is a great example of something that has a real world application, and something that we've always said helps to prepare kids, helps to prepare the students that we have for the real world. I can't tell you how many times this summer I was in situations where somebody was bemoaning the fact that somebody who was under the age of 25 had a deficit in what they deemed an essential skill of being able to count back change. And so this seems like a real world application, something where we're preparing students for the real world. And I discovered in preparing for this today a statistic that absolutely blew my mind. From Statista, statistics about point of sale preferred methods of payment for the last several years. In 2022, cash accounted for 12% of point of sale transactions. Credit cards and debit cards together accounted for a little over 70% of point of sale transactions. And for the first time ever back in 2021, e-wallet or digital and mobile wallet payments at point of sale systems caught up to cash. Now, that blew me away, that we have reached a point now in the real world where e-wallet and digital mobile wallet payments are being done at the same rate as cash transactions are being done, and credit cards and debit cards blow them both away. So do we want students to be able to recognize coins and be able to do those kind of calculations when they've got the physical cash in their hands? Yeah, we want to do that, but we're going to have to start letting go of that idea that by doing that, we are preparing students for the real world. The real world is changing at a pace greater than we're oftentimes keeping up with. So why do we really want to change? Well, that world that we're preparing students for is also changing. Let's take a look back at some gigantic changes in education. In 1954, segregation in public education was deemed unconstitutional, and people thought it would ruin the education system. 1965, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, completely revolutionized the way we looked at education. 1975, free and appropriate public education for all students, regardless of disability, became mandated, and it revolutionized the way we looked at education. Those were gigantic sea changes in education in this country. So now we take a look at some things that have happened since then that have kind of sent some shockwaves, some ripples through educators. In 1994, Tori, we have finally reached the era where you were around for some of this. A portion of the SAT permits, for the first time, use of a calculator, and people thought this was going to ruin math education. That we would have to totally rethink how we did everything. In 2003, Microsoft Word for the first time included built-in spell check, and we all learned what the little red squiggly line under a word meant. People thought that was just going to revolutionize everything. It was going to ruin the spelling test forever, that nobody would ever know how to spell anything anymore because spell check was now available. And much more recently, in 2022, if you haven't heard yet, an AI tool called ChatGPT was released for public use. And once again, people got the idea, oh my gosh, this is going to change everything. This is going to ruin everything. This is going to just absolutely mess up everything that I've ever done with education. How are we going to survive this? Well, we've survived every one of these changes before that. We can survive all of these if we take a little closer look at how we're putting our lessons together and how we're putting learning opportunities together for the students that we serve. We have a choice. We can either retrofit or we can innovate. And there really are some advantages to both. And there are some times to do both of these. But let's take a look at how, when we try just simply to react and retrofit, what happens sometimes. All right. The problem with retrofits is, even though they try to fix one problem, they sometimes, or they oftentimes, end up causing another. All right. They can be pretty ugly. Sometimes they can be pretty expensive, and they don't always really take care of what the real problem is. So we can put in some of these retrofits. We can do some of these things to try to keep everything we already have and just do one little retrofit to help one problem. But a lot of times that doesn't really address the issue, and it may expose more problems that really exist. So retrofits aren't always the best approach. If we take a cue from user experience, though, we oftentimes find out that the students we're working with have a good idea of what they want to accomplish and what the best way, and sometimes we'll call it a shortcut, but really it's what the best way is for them to accomplish some of these things. On the left, you see an example of where design has tried to make it more difficult to do something, and user experience has just literally found a way around that. All right. On the right, you've got an experience where design was actually there to help guide people how to get from one spot to another. User experience found something quicker, found something easier, and created a different way. Now, we can bemoan the fact that user experience has found a way around some of the things we've put in place, or has found a way to do things better, or we can reflect on how we're utilizing principles of design to take into account those user experiences and what we can learn from them, instead of trying to force the user experience into what we want. I hear talk a lot more lately about this idea of future-proofing our questions. I'm going to be really honest. I don't like the term future-proof. I'm not sure, because we don't know what the future holds. I don't know that future-proof is really a thing. All right. However, we can kind of restructure, redesign our questions so that we are really checking for the learning that we want, instead of trying to just ask a question that might or might not reflect what we really want students to learn. For instance, on the left, here's a question that might come out of a social studies or out of a history class. Name 5 U.S. cabinet positions that existed in 1879. All right. A fact-based question. Somebody could go look that up and be able to give you that information. As a matter of fact, I could probably find that information in those encyclopedias that I showed you earlier. If you wanted to go to Wikipedia, you could find the answer to this pretty quick. This is also a question that Google can answer pretty easily, much easier than a person can. All right, so there's not a whole lot that has to be invested into that question. I can reshape that question to ask, hey, President-elect Rutherford B. Hayes has written you a letter. He's offering you any position that you want in his cabinet after his inauguration. Which department do you want to lead? And what is your top priority to accomplish during your time of service? That I have asked exactly the same question, because in order to answer that question on the right, you're going to have to know the U.S. cabinet positions that existed in 1879. But you're also going to have to go the extra step of, okay, what do I care about? What did these cabinet positions do? What were they in charge of? And how does that match up to what I would be interested in? What would I be interested in? What cause would I be interested in advocating if I existed in 1879? So I've just reshaped. I haven't just completely thrown the question out. I've just reshaped it in a way that Google is not going to be able to answer that question on the right for me. I'm going to have to invest some of my own self into answering that question. My answer also can't be exactly the same as the person next to me. And so by rewording, by refashioning some of these questions, just kind of innovating a little bit inside the question, I can actually come up with something that makes sure that my students are learning what I wanted them to learn. We want to nurture that critical thinking agility so that students can take on some of that task for themselves. When we solve real problems with real learning, that's where we have made a lasting change in our students. Sometimes we feel like okay, for a while we're teaching standards, and now we're gonna pause at the standards a little bit and do something students are interested in. I don't think that that's necessarily an either or situation. We can tie standards to student interests. Let's go back to that money discussion we had a little bit earlier about students being able to recognize the value of coins, bills, of coins and bills. Well, I want them to recognize the value of coins and bills. I also want them to recognize the value of money. So one great tool that I love is this online game from the FDIC. So if you go to playmoneysmart.fdic.gov, you and your students can go through this simulation on using credit cards. Great little game to expose students to some of this process. Now, how would I use this? You could use this just as like a sub-plan, throw it out there. I would suggest, however, after you do a lesson on something like calculating with percentages. I do a lesson on calculating with percentages. Students understand what a percentage looks like, how to calculate them, how to work with them. Now I want you to go through this using credit card simulation. And while you're doing it, find 3 places where it asks you to calculate a percentage and write those problems down. We'll solve them as a group later. And so you're having them identify some of those things that you're trying to teach them inside of a real world application. Great little tool to be able to use. If you've never heard of the Pacific Northwest tree octopus, I would absolutely encourage you to look it up. Everybody wants to save endangered species, right? So go look for the Pacific Northwest tree octopus and see what kind of information you can find and how you might want to get your students involved in the fight, in the cause to save the endangered Pacific Northwest tree octopus from extinction. Now, after you've done that, you might also want to engage in a little classroom discussion on finding quality information online. iCivics.org has a lot of great tools. One of them that I've really fallen in love with more lately is their game Newsfeed Defenders, where you are checking the integrity of information that is being posted online against several different statuses. A great tool to be able to use for a lot of different grade levels. BBC's iReporter is another great tool you can use. I especially like the twist that this one has on it because it puts you not just in the role of an information consumer, it puts you in the role of a news reporter. So you have to put yourself in the situation of, okay, is this information that I'm seeing, is it accurate? Does it have an impact? And can I get it to people quickly? Combining all of those puts the user in the role of having to make the decision, okay, do I convey this information or not? Is this something that is this information that I need to spread? Or is this information that may be a little suspicious for some reason and I need to skip it over? Great little tool for your students to be able to use to exercise some of those skills. So we can't do any of this stuff without also weaving in the idea of mastering netiquette and digital literacy. I've been a strong proponent for a long time that netiquette and digital literacy is not a 1 week or 2 week subject during a technology class. Okay, this is something that has to be woven through everything that we do. We don't just teach spelling in English class and then never worry about spelling anywhere else. All right. Same thing here. We don't just worry about netiquette and digital literacy during that few weeks of technology class and then ignore it every other time. This is something that needs to get woven through everything that we do. Some of my favorite resources for this, if you go to commonsense.org, they have an entire section on digital citizenship with some pre-made lesson plans, some collected resources, not just videos and electronic resources, but some classroom posters that you can download and put around. They also have some games, grades 3 through 5 and grades 6 through 8 have some pretty cool student games that you can use. That grades 3 through 5 digital passport tool is really cool too, because it doesn't just have students concerned about security and privacy online. It also concerns some ideas about like multitasking and being a healthy and good citizen online. Effective search techniques, and also a nifty little lesson on creative credit and actually when it is and isn't okay to use and reuse material that you find online for other things as part of a digital citizenship campaign as well. Another great tool for you to use. Take a look at that from Common Sense Education. Always love to mention this one from Google, the beinternetawesome.withgoogle.com. Their Interland does a great tool. It does a great job of, because oftentimes some of these things will be about what you don't do online. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this other thing. And it gets very negative very quickly. Interland does a great job of couching everything in positive terms, that when you're working online, be smart, be alert, be strong, be kind, be brave, all of those positive things that you can do to make it all seem a little less scary. Now, the question that is always going to get asked by your students, by a lot of your students anyway, is, am I going to be tested on this, or do I need to know this? And as soon as I'm talking about any of this stuff with students and they ask me, am I going to be tested on this, or do I need to know this? My answer is always, yeah, every day for the rest of your life. Because anytime you run up against phishing scams, malware, possibility of identity theft, possibility of other kinds of scams, or even cyberbullying and other types of mistreatment of others online. Those are the kind of cases where all of this information, all of these things are going to be really super important for us to regularly do, and for our students to regularly do as well. We will be tested on this every day. And so it's important that we help our students become innovative users, but also safe users of the digital resources that we're putting in place for them. And that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of this series during our webinars this year. At this point, I'm going to kick it back to Tori to see if she has anything that has come in that we need to address before we wrap up.
Michael, thank you so much. That was just so much amazing information in such a short amount of time. I know that's no easy task, but I really just love the tangible things that teachers can do every day to just embrace the future and help our kids embrace the future too. So thank you again so much. Now, we don't have a whole lot of time left. And while I go over some of our Forward Edge services, if you think about it, or if you want to, just go ahead and drop the most interesting, the coolest, something that really resonated with you that you heard, drop it in the chat. And we just really love to see it. We love hearing the feedback and things of that nature. So if you're interested in earning or renewing your Google for Education certification, so things like your level 1, your level 2, your certified trainer, we offer comprehensive training experiences in person or virtual, led by Google certified trainers. So that's an amazing service. You can also meet your specific classroom needs by utilizing our Anytime, Anywhere Edu Badge program. Through badges, you can learn about various topics at your own pace, wherever you need to do it. And these are tools and skills and strategies that you can turn around and use in your classroom immediately to directly impact learning. You can also earn points while you're earning the badges themselves, and these can be turned into contact hours or graduate credits, which is amazing. We also offer cyber tips and teacher trainings for the ever important cybersecurity, which is something that we touched on in this webinar. So good things to be aware of. Now, as for coaches, if you're looking for a coaching community, you want to add some of the tried and true strategies to your coaching toolbox, learn how to market yourself and your strategies as well, and just learn more about planning PD and utilizing coaching models, Coaches Camp is the place for you. Now, we have another Coaches Camp coming up this fall, so keep those eyes peeled for some of the information on that going forward. And last but certainly not least, we at Forward Edge offer a range of coaching resources from the EDO Coach Network to our Restart Recharge podcast. If you're looking for a coaching community, truly look no further. We've got you here. So definitely some things for you to check out. Now, don't forget, sign up for next month's webinar, which is the role of arts and creativity in K-12 classrooms at forward-edge.net/webinars. It's going to be a good one. Remember, they're the third Thursday of every month at 3 p.m. We are so excited for the next one coming up. And as for you here today, thank you so much for joining us. We really look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Have a great rest of your day.